Our managed care team focuses a disproportionately large amount of time not on government plans, but on commercial plans. Because now that we have a Medicare decision that's controlled by really one decision and one payment assignment, we have to focus on the 50 to 100 to 200 other independent decisions that are held by the commercial health plans in the U.S. In the managed care world, and you'll hear people say this all the time, if you've seen one payer, you've seen one payer, meaning they are such independent entities that you cannot expect them to fall as dominoes, and they don't. Certainly there are health plans like any other customer, if you think of them as a customer, that are early adopters versus late adopters. And there are certainly health plans that may be, in a life cycle of their company where they care more about molecular diagnostics, or maybe they care more about surgical products. You could go on and on with the examples. But, trying to understand who cares about what you're doing the most right now or in 2 years when you're going to be ready to talk to them is incredibly important. And then you kind of can sequence your reimbursement strategy in that way. The other sequence that you have to think about is, when is your evidence going to be ready? And so not every trial that you're doing is of equal importance to every plan. And there may be things that are more important to regional blue plans versus things that are very important to a national plan like Aetna or Humana. There may be things that are incredibly important to Medicare Advantage members, which are important to United, for example, and Humana, versus other smaller health plans that don't carry Medicare Advantage membership. So depending on the cohort, the nature of their business, you're going to sequence your evidence production according to when you want to target those health plans. So I guess that's a long way of saying, you sequence your evidence and you're targeting to them from a customer perspective or a selling perspective according to when you're going to have that data ready. And ideally, you want to sequence them in a way that the mounting data and the mounting decisions can topple even the late adopters, and that's what you're going for. You've got to realize commercial health plans are looking at things very often on a 12-month time frame as opposed to a 30-year time frame. Once you're in the Medicare system, there are certainly many patients who stay in the Medicare system for 30, 40 years because people are living so much longer. But commercial health plans, it's very common for people to move in health plans every 1 or 2 years. So the time horizon is very different for how a medical director or the business side of a health plan thinks about integrating new technology for a commercial plan than for Medicare. And so understanding that and understanding that your arguments around your justification for coverage and your justification for a certain payment level and the economics associated with that are going to have to circle around a 12-month time frame. It's not cost effectiveness, it's really cost savings. And understanding that you have to think in terms of their economical time frame, not Medicare's. That's one of the biggest distinctions. It's still evidence. It's still relying on your primary evidence. I mean, the evidence hasn't necessarily changed, with the exception that potentially, depending on your population that your product works in, you may need to have cohorts that are Medicare-only cohorts versus younger patient cohorts, and that depends on the product type. Our studies included both, and so we never did separate studies. Understanding that there are different ways to cut your data, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it, that are important, that depending on the payer that you're looking at, and trying to understand that early and then proactively bringing that to them as soon as you can.